A biker gang surrounded an elderly black woman, ready to have their fun. What they didn't know? Her dog was more than just a pet. He was trained to protect, and he was about to teach them a brutal lesson. The sun was beginning to set over the quiet highway, casting an orange glow over a small gas station, tucked between the long stretches of road. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for a quick meal, where bikers gathered before a long ride, and where few people stayed longer than necessary. At one of the rusted picnic tables outside the gas station, an elderly black woman sat with a calm demeanor, sipping from a small cup of coffee. She wore a faded brown coat, the kind that had seen many years, and a scarf neatly wrapped around her silver curls. There was nothing particularly remarkable about her, at least to those who didn't pay attention. Beside her, lying obediently on the ground, was a large Belgian Malinois with a thick coat of sable fur and eyes that gleamed with quiet intelligence. He wasn't panting like most dogs would on a warm evening. He wasn't distracted by the sounds of trucks rolling by or the occasional laughter from a group of bikers near the parking lot. He was still, watchful, almost as if he were waiting. A young gas station attendant, barely out of his teenage years, wiped his hands on his greasy apron and stole a glance at the old woman's companion. Something about the way the dog carried himself made his stomach twist. "That's not just any dog," he muttered under his breath. But no one was listening. The group of bikers lounging by their motorcycles barely spared the old woman a glance at first. They were too busy laughing, throwing empty beer cans toward a trash bin, talking about the ride they had just taken through the hills. They were the kind of men who enjoyed feeling in control, who thrived on the fear or submission of those around them. And yet, here was this tiny old woman, sitting there completely unbothered, her dog lying beside her like a shadow. One of the bikers, a large man with a thick beard and an old leather jacket, nudged his friend with his boot. "Look at that," he smirked. "Sweet old lady out here all alone." His friend chuckled. "With that beast of a dog." The bearded man squinted at the Malinois, noting the dog's posture. Something about the way it rested, its head slightly raised, its ears flicking at every sound. Something was off. But then the dog blinked, yawned lazily, and the biker shook off the feeling. "Come on, man," another one said. "Let's go talk to her." The men strolled over, casual, but with an unmistakable air of dominance. The gas station attendant, still watching from behind the counter, muttered a curse under his breath. He knew these guys. They weren't the kind to have a simple conversation. The elderly woman, however, didn't seem the least bit fazed when she noticed them approaching. In fact, she barely even acknowledged them, as if their presence was of no real consequence to her. She continued sipping her coffee, her eyes distant, her fingers absent-mindedly running through the fur of the dog beside her. The leader of the bikers stepped forward, placing a boot on the bench across from her. "That's a big dog you got there, ma'am," he said, grinning. The woman didn't look up. "He's a good boy." One of the others laughed. "Yeah? He don't look like much. Just another mutt." For the first time, the woman raised her gaze, meeting the biker's eyes with an expression so unreadable, so steady, that it made the man hesitate. Rex, the Malinois, let out a low breath through his nose, silent, but heavy, with something that made even the most arrogant man feel a tinge of unease. The gas station attendant gripped the counter a little tighter. He had seen a lot of things in this place, but something told him he was about to witness something completely different. The tension in the air thickened as the bikers loomed over the elderly woman, their smirks widening, their eyes gleaming with the kind of amusement that only came from preying on someone they believed to be weak. The gas station attendant, still watching from behind the counter, felt a knot form in his stomach. He had seen these men mess with people before. Truckers, drifters, the occasional unlucky passerby. But this was different. The leader of the group, the bearded man in the weathered leather jacket, leaned forward, resting his hands on the table between them. His fingers were adorned with silver rings, thick and heavy. "You know, lady," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This ain't exactly the safest place for someone like you to be sitting around all alone." The woman didn't even blink. She lifted her coffee to her lips, took a slow sip, and placed the cup down with a gentle clink. "I'm not alone," she said. One of the bikers scoffed. "Oh, you mean the dog?" He nudged Rex's paw with his boot, expecting the animal to flinch, to move, to show some kind of reaction. But the Malinois didn't so much as twitch. His amber eyes remained locked onto the leader, his body completely still. Too still. The bearded man chuckled, cracking his knuckles. "He's got some nerve, I'll give him that," he said. Then he looked back at the woman. "But see, thing is, we don't really like when people ignore us." He reached out, slow and deliberate, as if testing his limits. His fingers brushed against the woman's scarf, tugging it slightly. "Maybe you should—" Rex moved. It happened so fast that no one had time to process it. 1 second, the biker was standing tall, smirking. The next, he was on his back, the force of the Malinois' lunge sending him sprawling across the pavement. His breath left him in a strangled gasp, his arms flailing as he tried to push the dog away. But Rex had already backed off, standing protectively in front of the woman, his stance firm, his teeth bared. The entire group froze. The gas station attendant muttered, "Oh shit." The bearded man scrambled to his feet, face red with anger and embarrassment. "You stupid mutt," he snarled, reaching into his jacket, his hand curling around something metal. A knife. Rex didn't move. He didn't need to. The woman finally spoke, her voice as calm as it had been before. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The biker hesitated, the blade half drawn. "Oh yeah?" he sneered. "And why not?" The woman exhaled slowly, her fingers idly stroking Rex's fur. "Because he's not just any dog." There was a brief silence before one of the younger bikers, the one who had tried to nudge Rex earlier, suddenly stiffened. His eyes darted between the dog and the woman, realization dawning on his face. "Wait," he muttered. "That's a—" "Shut up," the leader snapped. He turned his glare back to the woman. "Lady, I don't care what kind of dog he is. You think this mutt can stop all of us?" The other bikers chuckled, the bravado creeping back into their postures. One of them kicked over the coffee cup, sending the dark liquid spilling across the pavement. "We could just take him," another jeered. "See how tough he is without you." The gas station attendant flinched. He wanted to do something, to step in, to call the cops, but he knew it would be too late by the time anyone got there. His heart pounded as he braced for what was coming. The woman sighed, as if deeply disappointed. "You boys never learn," she murmured. Then she gave a single command. "Rex, guard." And just like that, the game changed. The shift in the air was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A quiet, deadly change. The moment the word left the woman's lips, Rex moved, not with the reckless aggression of an untrained animal, but with the calculated precision of a soldier executing a command. He didn't lunge immediately. He didn't bark or growl. He simply stood, muscles coiled beneath his thick coat, head low, eyes locked onto the bearded biker, as if assessing a target. A predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The laughter from the group faltered. The leader, now on edge, tightened his grip on the knife. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, his bravado slipping. "It's just a damn dog." But the youngest of the bikers, the one who had hesitated earlier, was already backing away. "No," he muttered. "That's not just a dog. That's a canine." The realization hit like a freight train. The stiffness in the way Rex held himself, the eerie silence, the way his focus never wavered. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. The bearded man scoffed, masking his growing unease with arrogance. "So what? It's an old police dog. That just means he's slow." As if responding to the insult, Rex let out a single deep growl. It was not the frantic reactive sound of an untrained animal. It was deliberate, a warning. The woman remained seated, still stroking her scarf, as if none of this concerned her. "He may be retired," she said, "but he hasn't forgotten how to work." The leader's expression twisted into something between fury and humiliation. He glanced around at his crew, then back at the woman. His pride was on the line now. There was no way he was walking away from this without saving face. "Fine," he spat. "Let's see what your mutt can do." He whistled sharply, and in an instant, two of his men stepped forward, one of them reaching for the woman's arm, while the other moved toward Rex. It was a mistake. Before either of them could react, Rex exploded into action. The biker closest to him barely had time to blink before the Malinois launched, striking with the force of a sledgehammer. His jaws locked around the man's forearm, twisting sharply as the biker screamed, staggering back and dropping to one knee. The second biker, who had reached for the woman, froze in shock, and then he ran. Rex released his grip, allowing the first man to stumble away, clutching his injured arm. But he didn't chase the one who fled. He didn't need to. His mission was protection, not revenge. The gas station attendant watched in awe, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had never seen anything like it. This wasn't an attack dog. This was something else entirely. A weapon trained to disable, to neutralize threats without hesitation. The bearded leader was no longer smirking. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, true fear flickered in his eyes. You trained that thing to attack people?" he growled, his voice unsteady. The woman shook her head. "No," she said simply. "I trained him to protect." The tension was suffocating now. The remaining bikers shifted uneasily, no longer so sure of themselves. The one who had fled was already at his bike, fumbling with his keys in a desperate attempt to get away. The leader's fingers twitched around his knife. His ego screamed at him to fight, to take control of the situation, but his instincts told him something else, something he wasn't willing to admit. He was outmatched. Still, he took a step forward, pointing the blade at the woman. "Call him off," he demanded, voice laced with frustration. She didn't even flinch. Or what? The leader hesitated. He was losing this battle, not just physically, but psychologically. He could feel the eyes of his men on him, waiting to see what he would do next. If he backed down now, he would lose their respect. And then, before he could decide, Rex took a step closer. Just one step. But it was enough. The leader swallowed hard. He could handle a fight. He had been in plenty. But this was different. This wasn't some bar brawl or street scuffle. This was a professional. A dog who had been trained to take down criminals, who had seen things far worse than a group of arrogant bikers. And right now, that dog had chosen his target. The bearded man took a step back, then another. His pride was screaming at him to fight, but his survival instincts finally won out. "Let's go," he muttered through gritted teeth. "What?" one of his men sputtered. "We can't just—" "I said let's go." The gang hesitated, but the decision had been made. One by one, they backed off, retreating to their bikes, shooting nervous glances at Rex, who still hadn't broken eye contact with their leader. The bearded man climbed onto his motorcycle, revving the engine, his expression thunderous. He spat onto the pavement, glaring at the woman one last time. "This isn't over." The woman smiled. "It is for you." And with that, the bikers roared out of the gas station, their pride battered, their egos bruised. The gas station attendant exhaled, barely realizing he had been holding his breath. He turned to the woman, still stunned. That was... holy shit. She merely picked up her empty coffee cup, brushing off the dirt from where it had spilled earlier. "Just another evening," she said casually. Rex finally relaxed, sitting back down beside her, his tail flicking lazily. The attendant shook his head in disbelief. "That dog? I mean, what the hell was that?" The woman looked down at Rex, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. "That," she said, "was restraint." The low rumble of motorcycle engines faded into the distance, but the tension still lingered in the air. The gas station was silent now, save for the faint rustling of the wind and the slow, steady breathing of the Belgian Malinois sitting beside the elderly woman. The young attendant exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I can't believe that just happened," he muttered, shaking his head. Your dog, just sent a whole gang running like scared little kids." The woman remained seated, her expression unreadable. She reached down, fingers brushing over the top of Rex's head. He didn't react much, just a small flick of his ear, his eyes still locked on the direction the bikers had fled. Ever vigilant, ever aware. But before anyone could settle, a new sound cut through the evening air. The deep growling roar of a single motorcycle engine. The bearded leader was back. His bike screeched to a halt at the edge of the lot, the tires kicking up dust. He dismounted slowly, his boots heavy against the pavement. His face was twisted with rage, his pride wounded deeper than any physical injury. "I don't run from anyone," he growled. "And I sure as hell don't take orders from some old woman and her damn dog." Rex stiffened. His body went still again, that same eerie stillness as before. His ears perked, his tail lowered, his focus sharpened, like the edge of a blade. The gas station attendant took a step back. Lady?" he murmured. "I think he's serious." The woman finally looked up, meeting the biker's eyes with a gaze so steady, so unwavering, that it made the man falter for just a second. Just a second. "You don't want to do this," she said simply. The biker sneered, pulling something from his jacket, a chain, thick and heavy, wrapped around his fist. "No." He took a step closer. "Then call off your damn dog and fight me yourself." The attendant let out a nervous chuckle. "Dude, are you hearing yourself right now?" But the biker wasn't listening. He was too deep in his own fury, too desperate to reclaim his power. He raised the chain, gripping it like a weapon, ready to swing. The woman didn't move. "Rex," she said softly. And that was all it took. The Malinois launched forward, but not in a reckless, uncontrolled attack. His movements were calculated, precise, years of training embedded deep in his muscle memory. The biker barely had time to react before Rex struck. The dog didn't aim for the throat or the face. No, this wasn't about killing. This was about control. Neutralization. Jaws clamped down hard around the biker's wrist, the very one gripping the chain. The force sent a shockwave through his arm, making his fingers go numb. His grip loosened, the chain slipping from his grasp. The man let out a strangled yell, staggering backward, but Rex didn't let go. He held firm, immobilizing his target without breaking the skin. Just enough pressure to remind the biker exactly who was in control now. The woman stood slowly, brushing off her coat as she approached. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You made a mistake," she said calmly. "And now, you get to live with it." The biker gasped, struggling. But the moment he tried to jerk free, Rex tightened his grip ever so slightly, enough to send another jolt of pain up his arm. His eyes widened, pure, unfiltered fear. The woman stepped even closer. "You think strength comes from being feared," she continued. "But real strength? It comes from knowing when to walk away." She snapped her fingers once. Rex released instantly. The biker stumbled back, clutching his wrist as if the pain lingered long after the pressure was gone. His breath came in ragged gasps, his entire body shaking. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the man lowered his head. He turned without a word, climbed back onto his bike, and rode off into the darkness. No threats, no bravado, just silence. The gas station attendant let out a low whistle. "Holy hell," he murmured. "That was the coolest thing I've ever seen." The woman chuckled softly, kneeling beside Rex and scratching behind his ears. "He still remembers his training," she mused, "even after all these years." Rex gave a single wag of his tail, then settled back down beside her, content. The battle was over, and they had won. Not with violence, but with discipline, control, and a lesson the biker would never forget. The dust settled. The rumble of the motorcycle faded into the night, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the highway. The gas station, once heavy with tension, now felt eerily calm, as if the ground itself exhaled in relief. The young attendant let out a long breath, still gripping the counter like he needed it to keep himself standing. He had seen fights before, bar brawls, roadside scuffles. But this was something entirely different. He turned to the old woman, disbelief still etched into his face. "Ma'am, I don't even know what to say." She simply smiled, kneeling beside Rex and brushing her fingers through his thick fur. The Malinois, now relaxed, licked his lips lazily, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just dismantled a man's ego in mere seconds. A few truckers, who had been silent spectators until now, finally stepped forward. One of them, a burly man in a flannel shirt, shook his head in admiration. "I've seen some badass things in my time," he muttered. "But that takes the cake." Another chuckled, nodding toward Rex. "Hell, I wouldn't mess with that dog if you paid me." The young attendant laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, no kidding." He hesitated before glancing at the woman. "I gotta ask, was he really a police dog?" She nodded, her fingers still idly scratching behind Rex's ear. "Best partner I ever had," she said simply. The attendant's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, you mean you were a cop too?" The woman smiled, but there was something unreadable in her expression. A memory, perhaps. A life she had long since walked away from. "Once," she admitted. "A long time ago." The men exchanged glances, newfound respect shining in their eyes. The bikers had underestimated her. Everyone had. But they wouldn't make that mistake again. As the gas station returned to its usual quiet hum of late-night activity, the woman stood, stretching slightly before turning toward Rex. "Come on, boy," she murmured. "Let's get moving." The Malinois stood immediately, ready as ever, and together they walked off into the night, leaving behind a lesson no one would soon forget. The highway stretched before them, endless and open. The woman walked at a steady pace, her steps unhurried, her presence unshaken. Beside her, Rex moved in perfect sync, his ears flicking at every sound, ever watchful, ever ready. He was no longer just a police dog. He was more than that now. He was family. The gas station attendant watched them go, still feeling the weight of everything that had just unfolded. He let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Damn," he muttered. "That's the kind of story no one would ever believe, unless they saw it themselves." The truckers around him nodded in agreement. No one would ever forget the sight of that gang leader, shaking as he climbed onto his bike, or the unwavering steel in the old woman's eyes. Strength wasn't always about muscle. Sometimes it was about presence, about knowing exactly who you are and daring anyone to challenge it. A cool wind rolled through the lot, carrying with it the echoes of an unspoken truth. Never underestimate someone just because of how they look, especially if they have a dog like that. As the woman and Rex disappeared into the distance, the attendant found himself smirking. "If I ever see her again," he murmured, "I'm buying her coffee." And just like that, the night moved on. But for those who had witnessed what happened, things would never quite be the same. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Have you ever seen karma unfold in real life like this? And hey, if you love stories of unexpected justice, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You never know when the next great story will drop.